Hey there, Super Chops by Howard Roberts, a classic jazz method book. We're going to take a look at this, and I'm going to do my best to try to explain the content of this book and how you can use it in your practice routine. Straight off the bat, I don't think this book is in print anymore, so I don't actually think you can find it. I've seen some really expensive copies for sale on Amazon, I think, and I wouldn't recommend paying that much money for it. I think you can probably find the PDF of it if you're good at that. But even if you don't have the book, you can still use the information in your practice routine. It is a program, so I'll do my best to explain the actual program, the boot camp, if you will, 20 weeks. I'll also explain later on in the video some ideas that I got from this book and how you can expand on the overall concept of the book to maybe practice in a way that you perhaps haven't thought about before. I always feel like I talk too much in the beginning of the video, so let's just get right into it. So it is a method book. There's a bunch of chord progressions, and every week, each week is a project. Project lesson 1, week 1. Let's start there, shall we? So what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to take this tune. There's a tune here, a set of chord changes, a chord progression of his called Project 1. And it's just like a typical kind of quintessential jazz chord progression with changes. And then there's a schedule, a very specific routine that you're supposed to go through here. So before you do anything, preparation, step 1. So it's about an hour. You're supposed to do an hour a day, 6 days a week, and 1 day off. So step 1, clear your work area of all things not pertaining to this lesson. Your smartphone. So this obviously is, I think this is from the 70s. It's funny to think about that. I mean, a lot of people use their smartphone when practicing, and I'm guilty of that too, but I prefer to not use my smartphone when I'm practicing because it's a distraction, right? Tune your guitar. Again, today we have tuners. You might use your smartphone as a tuner, right? Or like one of those headstock tuners. I always thought about that when I was studying in high school stuff. I don't think we had tuners. So that's just funny to think about how that has changed. Step 3, warm up. Horn players have to warm up. We guitar players, we tend to ignore that sometimes. So warm up. And then the 50-minute program. Play eighth notes once through the progression to establish your tempo of the day. So the chord progression here, you're supposed to try and see how fast you can play consistent eighth notes. That's the idea of this exercise. You're supposed to play consistent uninterrupted eighth notes. Week end tempo objective is 60 beats per minute. That's a fairly reasonable tempo. So try to find a tempo where you think you can do that with no problem. I think I can do it at 70. So I'm going to set the tempo slightly higher than the objective, but I've done this stuff before. Now, next step, 10-minute step, pre-record yourself playing the chord changes, sustained, no rhythm, with the metronome nearby so that it will sound on the tape like a click track. Repeat the progression non-stop for 10 minutes. So he's asking you to use a tape recorder or something, right? Remember the book is from the 70s? And record yourself playing these chords. And the chords are written out exactly how he wants you to play them. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I don't really see the point. So you can play the chords any way you feel like, I think. So it's a typical jazz progression. But he doesn't want you to use rhythm, just the metronome. So I'm going to record the first 16 bars of this exercise because there's not enough time to do the whole thing. So I'm going to use my loop pedal. So sometimes I was playing the exact fingering, the voicing that he's asking for, and other times I was ignoring that because some of those voicings I find a little bit funny. This is supposed to take 10 minutes. You're supposed to set a timer and play this chord progression for 10 minutes as your backing track and use that as your backing track. Now we can use a loop pedal, which again is like technology has changed since this book was written. And you might think, well, that's an advantage, right? That's great that I don't have to play those chords. But maybe there's something missing there, because maybe it's a good idea to play for 10 minutes. Maybe we're losing something when we're using loop pedals. So I'm not against the loop pedal. I've used the loop pedal all the time. It might be a good idea to actually play the progression for 10 minutes, even though you're using a loop pedal, because most loop pedals can record for more than 10 minutes anyway. Okay, now you're supposed to take a break for 2 minutes. Step 6, rewind the machine. Focus your attention on the chord progression. So if you play the progression for 10 minutes, you're probably pretty familiar with it by now. Now, for 10 minutes, you're supposed to play along with this now. Uninterrupted eighth notes. Okay? So I'll do that, but I'm not going to do it for 10 minutes because I would bore you to death. I'm just going to do it for a little bit, so you'll see what it sounds like. You get the idea. You do that for 10 minutes over the whole progression. This is just a part of the progression. You're not supposed to use anything but eighth notes. And alternate picking everything. Not really clear why there. And no like legato hammer-ons and pull-offs. He introduces that later on. But first months, you're just supposed to play eighth notes, pick every note. And I guess the idea there is that sometimes when we don't know what to play, we start to, do the kind of guitarisms, like, because we don't know what to play. So we want to avoid that and just play eighth notes. And what are you supposed to play? Like, arpeggios, scales, or licks, or a little bit of everything. Like, it doesn't really matter that much. As long as you just play, you commit yourself to play for 10 minutes at whatever tempo you're comfortable with. It's not supposed to be fast, even if you could play faster. And over the chords, there are brackets with key centers. So you could treat the whole chord progression as key centers. In other words, ignoring some of the chords that stand out, or you could treat each chord the corresponding scale for each chord. So I'm going to try to use the key centers now, only key centers. I'm not going to try to hit those notes of the C plus 11 there, the D minus 755. I'm just going to play the key centers. This is B flat stuff, E flat, D flat, back to B flat. F. And C minor. B flat. So even though there's a B7 sharp 9 there, I was just playing B flat there. And it sounds totally fine, right? But you have the option of playing the altered scale, I guess, or some kind of altered scale that works with that chord. It only says B7 sharp 9. It doesn't say what the other extensions are. And or treat it like I just did with key centers. It's a little bit surprising how it's a little bit harder than you think, because it's easy to just what happens is that you're just playing scales. You're running scales up and down. You want to use intervals, right? And you want to jump around over the whole fretboard, and you want to maybe hint at patterns but not stay with a pattern for too long. So as an idea for what to play, on the next page he has a written out solo example of solos for every week's tune. So you can look at these as etudes, really good stuff. Notation, right? No tabs, but fingerings are written out. So I'll play you the first example of this is like what he suggests that you play, what it would sound like. So here's first example. Okay, so it's a little bit of everything. It's some chromatic, different intervals, random. I think it's random. Some arpeggio, scale, and then he does play the diminished scale. Some pentatonic type stuff. Pedal notes. Then plays the altered scale there, which is a little bit funny. And for the B7 sharp 9, he plays a B minor pentatonic. Where is it? Which works. There's only one note that is not part of the altered scale. So again, it doesn't have to be the exact correct scale. And sometimes he's thinking key centers. Sometimes he is actually playing the correct scale. And other times he's just playing something that is kind of a little bit outside almost. And that's how you play. A common mistake when somebody is learning how to play jazz improvisation is that they think that you have to play the correct scale to every chord. So they practice, the Dorian for the 2 chord and the altered for the dominant, and no, it doesn't work like that. You think that you have to play Lydian for the major 7 chords and altered scale for the altered dominant chords, and and so on. you don't have to play every correct scale for every chord. Or actually, if you did that, that would be painful. And that was a mistake I made. I remember I was trying to play Falling Grace or something, and I was trying to play every correct scale for every chord. And my teacher there at that time was Scott Henderson, and he just told me to stop, basically. It's like, try to just play something and ignore the chords. It's good to practice so that you are able to do that, but when you're actually playing, you should let go of all that information. So, who is this book for? Because it promises jazz guitar technique in 20 weeks, which is a bold statement. I would say if you're a student, jazz guitar student, and you know how to play a little bit of jazz, and you're a pretty good player, and you know your modes, and you know how the theory works, you know what scales you're supposed to play over the chords of, let's say, Stella by Starlight. And you can play along with a backing track, and it sounds okay. But every time you go and try to play for real, like with an ensemble or with your teacher or even a gig or a jam session, it doesn't really come out the way you want. There's something holding you back. If you're that person, this book or this way of practicing can really, really help. So then you've done that. You take a break for 2 minutes, set the guitar down, stand up, stretch, etc. Then you do it again, same thing, same tempo, and take a 2-minute break, 10 minutes of third time through. So altogether you played for 30 minutes with breaks that day. That's day one. And then here's a very important thing and very interesting thing, and one of the really good pieces of advice to take away from this book. Step 12, 2 minutes break, lie down, relax, close your eyes, so kind of meditate. Practice visualizing yourself playing the project the way you wish you had. Let me repeat that sentence. Practice visualizing yourself playing the project the way you wish you had. So imagine you do this 6 days a week for 20 weeks. And you finish each practice session with imagining what you want to sound like. So here's what you want to sound like, and here's what you actually sound like. By doing that, hopefully you will get a little bit closer day by day. You might never reach the ideal sound that you're aiming for, but a couple of things happen. What you hear in your mind gets better, and your playing gets better, and your playing gets closer to your ideal sound, if that makes sense. This is something that classical musicians do all the time. I was talking to a really accomplished saxophone professor who plays huge concerts. And he said anytime he has to play a really difficult solo piece performance, he will take long walks and just go over the music in his mind over and over. So when, like practicing without your instrument. So when he's on stage, he's kind of prepared mentally for that. So this is a really good thing to consider. Okay, so then you do that, and you're not supposed to increase the speed. You're supposed to, some days you might realize, oh, that was too fast. So tomorrow I'll bring the metronome down. It's not supposed to be like, faster and faster, really. That's not the point. So the tempo is whatever you feel like that day. And then next tune is the same tune, I think, but in a different key, right? And then you slightly faster, perhaps objective of that week. And then there's another example, like of his written out solo. Howard Roberts, by the way, is obviously an unbelievable guitar player. I was lucky enough to see him, must have been pretty close to before he died. I saw a workshop with him at Musicians Institute, and I think he's one of the founders of Musicians Institute. And then there's another chord progression, and so on and so on. Now, here's what I suggest. You don't have to use these chord progressions. You could use standards. I don't see really why you would use these chord progressions when you can practice your standards at the same time. So tunes that are fairly difficult, but not super difficult perhaps. So I would recommend like Stella by Starlight, All the Things You Are. So tunes that you can think of as key centers. It's harder to do with like a, Wayne Shorter tune or something like that. Even though you could do that too. But if you take, for example, Stella by Starlight. Let's do Stella by Starlight. So this is D minor, B flat major, and E flat major. For those bars. So even though the A flat dominant chord is not really from E flat major, you can still think E flat major there. So it's not because you're lazy, right? It's because it's just a different way of thinking rather than just thinking chord scales. So D minor. And then B flat major. E flat major. So even though I'm playing E flat major over that A flat 7, which is the wrong scale, because there's a wrong note there, it's just one note passes by, so it doesn't really matter that much. I'm not doing it because I'm lazy. I'm doing it because it's a different approach that opens up, so I'm not super locked into every chord and every scale. Then I can always choose to play the correct scale for like the A7 there. I could play some kind of altered scale there if I want to, but I don't have to. That's kind of the idea. When we're actually playing, we do a little bit of everything. Sometimes we're playing every chord, and sometimes we're not. And sometimes we're playing something that is totally outside of the theory book. You just happen to play something that sounds good. So we want to kind of also practice like that. I'll put my suggestion for key centers of Stella by Starlight on my Patreon page. You should be able to come up with your own key centers. Then you do this, and it's not until week 8 you do the same thing, this time with triplets. So you might have to slow down the tempo. I'll see if I can do triplets. Okay, so it's actually, for me, it's hard to not think about each chord. To think key centers should be easier, but I find it's more difficult because you fall into the habit of playing the stuff you always play over the same chord over a tune like that, you know what I mean? And habits are always bad when it comes to improvisation. Habits go against the idea of improvisation. So then you do that, you do that tune as well in 2 different keys. I would suggest it's a good idea to do Stella by Starlight in G major, because I think it's actually supposed to be in G major. And you take another tune, and then week 15, now you do both. You combine triplets with 8th notes. So something like, I don't know. That was bad. So there I was playing that G over the A flat 7. How many people thought, oh, he's playing a G over an A flat 7. Oh, my ear is hurting. even if you are good that you can pick up on that, oh, he's playing a major 7 over a dominant chord, it's still not very painful. Like, that's not important. The important thing is what you're playing. So when you do this much, you start thinking about, how can I, shift around between positions? I can do position shift. I can do slides. So slides as in position shift slides, not slides as an effect, because he doesn't want you to do that. You can do stretches. So there are 3 ways you can move around on the fretboard: position shift, slides, and stretch. So you think about things like that, and sometimes you might want to just jump to another area on the fretboard. If you play something up here, just jump somewhere else. It's kind of, with the whole idea is, don't stop playing 8th notes. So music moves forward. So you have to kind of keep playing. You have to commit yourself to, I'm going to play 8th notes for 10 minutes. It's actually harder than you think. So I remember seeing a video, I see if I can find it and I'll put a link to it, where Bobby Mcferrin talks about improvisation, and he suggests that you just set a timer, 10 minutes or so, and just start improvising. Just do anything. He doesn't say consistent 8th notes, but just improvise and try to make music, and don't look at the timer.
And the third thing is, you open up your mouth and you go. Commit yourself for singing for 10 minutes without stopping and see what happens. So whatever, for 10 minutes. Make sure that you don't stop. Just keep going, because the whole idea behind improvisation is simply motion. It's just the courage to keep going. So set a timer for 10 minutes.
It's actually harder than you think, right? And it's easy to get lost in, when we're practicing, in the kind of, scales and the turnarounds and arpeggios and chord tones. Sometimes we have to just remember that music needs to flow. So this is a way of practicing flow. I don't mean flow as in the creative flow process that some people talk about. I just mean that the music is flowing. The usual critique that people come up with is, I don't want to do this because, first of all, you don't play like that. And I don't like players that just play 8th notes without ever stopping. What makes a great solo is the use of space. And there's no space here. Obviously, we're just playing 8th notes. But the thing is this, you still need to be able to play consistent 8th notes, I think. If I ask you to play consistent 8th notes over Stella by Starlight, something that makes sense, and you can hear that you're playing the tune, and you can't do that at the slow tempo, you're not really ready to play Stella by Starlight. You know what I mean? And if you can do that, then you can decide where you put the space. The space shouldn't be because, I don't know what to play, or I'm lost. The space should be there because you decide to put the space there. In order to do that, you have to not use space there. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? There is, of course, a danger that you practice this way that might affect the way you play for a while, and you're going to play a lot of notes. But that's just a phase that you go through. We all go through phases like that, and you have to go through phases like that when you learn new stuff. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Now, so some of my own thoughts on this, you could actually do this, but you don't even have to take a standard. You could just play for 10 minutes, like Bobby Mcferrin suggests. Another video I saw, that was a long time ago, I think it was on Swedish television, a documentary about Keith Jarrett, who could be possibly the musician I respect the most. I just think he's the most unbelievable musician out there. And they're interviewing him at his home, and he's sitting he has a little practice studio. And he's just playing, but he's practicing, but he's not practicing anything, scales or anything. He's just playing music, non-stop, fantastic music just coming out of him. And I thought to myself, well, that's how you should practice. So after you've done with your daily routine of scales and arpeggios and learning tunes and all of it, just set a timer, and again, don't look at a timer. And this, I'm just gonna play something. Just, it could be with a loop, like a drum loop, or it could be just try to play anything. But what you could do is like you could also maybe perhaps practice a mode. So I'm gonna make a little loop with some kind of mode. So I'll make a little, let's say an E Phrygian loop. So here I'll play quarter notes, because it's a fast time. Okay, so when you do that, you're gonna tell yourself that, oh, this is silly, it sounds stupid, I'm not playing anything cool. Just keep playing. That's the whole idea. Just commit to keep playing. Don't worry if it sounds weird. And as soon as you fall into something that you kind of get stuck somewhere, just try to move somewhere. And it's getting into that habit of forward motion. You need the music to keep moving. You're always going to have that voice in your head that question what you're doing, but you ignore it and you just keep playing. That's the idea. Sounds weird? I don't know. Comment below if you think this is weird. So what I like to do is based off that, inspired by that Keith Jarrett video, I will take like maybe because he was playing something that sounds like gospel. So I would take maybe, I have this drum loop or app with a bunch of loops called Drum Genius. So in that spirit of that Keith Jarrett video, I'm just gonna take a loop, I'm just gonna jam with it. And I'm not gonna do 10 minutes now, but I would set a timer to 10 minutes and just jam. So now I'm not talking about playing consecutive 8 notes, I'm just jamming for fun. Try to play something that is, something. Okay, so this is just to get away from the practicing the technical stuff, just playing something that is fun. So try to maybe avoid, there was a bunch of licks there, but you try to not do too much of that. You try to just play more rhythmically. That's why it's good to have a very specific rhythm like that to kind of, as your inspiration, right? So that had nothing to do with this book, but if you really, really was intrigued by this book, you can probably find PDFs of it. I've seen it online. I pretty sure you can't find a copy of this book. It was published in 1978. The overall idea here was that to play consecutive eighth notes, but also based on that idea, you can practice playing something for us using a timer to keep playing, put yourself in that kind of mindset that you commit to playing for 10 minutes. It's a really good thing to do. It's fun and it's a good way to balance things if your practicing session is very based on theory and the analytical mindset. I hope that makes sense. So thank you for your time and attention again, and I shall see you next time. Boom.